In our Discord Q&A channel, one of our watchers, Big Mike, asked a question that we feel deserves more than a quick off-the-cuff response. So Tom and I decided to dive deep into it with a full-length video. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a way to segue the plugs once the video gets going, so they'll have to be first thing. Sorry about that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're on a roll now, help us continue it please, and our Discord is here. Come and join the fun and get your video suggestions heard. Just watch out for the Dutch in there, they're low on spices at the moment. Now to the premise of the video. Let's imagine Khal Drogo wasn't wounded and was able to secure a fleet to bring his 40,000 strong Khalasar to Westeros, just before the War of the Five Kings starts. All the Seven Kingdoms catches word of it, causing every lord to retreat to their home kingdom in case the Horse Lords decide their region is the springboard for the invasion. Which commanders and kingdoms would be best suited to stopping him? Now, this was meant to be a one-and-done type of vid, but the detail required for even a single kingdom became staggering when we started considering tactics and movements and so on. So for now, it's a quick ranking with some broad reasoning. If this video garners enough interest, we'll follow up with a more detailed analysis for each region and cap it off with how Drogo and Dany could potentially conquer all the kingdoms, including the use of Tom's animated tactical maps, which he is dying to use by the way, so please show this vid some support, and of course the alliance game mechanic turned back on. To be upfront, this scenario does include some very contrived actions, like Tywin abandoning his grandson in King's Landing, Ned somehow gaining a pardon and being permitted to return home up north, and perhaps most unlikely of all, Stannis putting his differences aside with Renly in order to defend the Stormlands. And yet somehow this will probably still make more sense than Season 8. Before we start listing off the kingdoms from most screwed to most secure though, we need to take a look at the Dothraki and their military capabilities, and decide which lens we're viewing them from. Despite their fierce reputation, the Horse Lords don't make a whole lot of sense as a realistic fighting force, and are a far cry from the Mongol Empire of which they take some inspiration from. The Mongols, for one, didn't think that armor was a coward's tool and had the common sense to use it. And while we romanticize their horse archers and feigned retreats as their signature tactic, they were far from one-trick ponies, and had an amazing command structure as well as organized armies consisting of more than just cavalry, which isn't really carried over into the chaotic, charging headfirst Dothraki military doctrine. The Horse Lords of A Song of Ice and Fire function effectively as light cavalry, effective for hit-and-run tactics and running down a broken or routed unit, but unable to fulfill the role of shock cavalry or fighting static engagements like mounted knights. In all honesty, if they are the lone force, you could stop them in the open field with a few well-dug ditches, a disciplined formation of spearmen or archers, or even just slightly unfavorable terrain. Light cavalry is much better utilized as a supporting unit rather than a primary force. Comparing them to the Mongols just isn't really fair, as the Mongols had superior tactics, diverse units, and adapted to different types of warfare. Even in story, it's kind of implied that Khal Drogo and his Dothraki are meant to be the starting force, a force that Viserys and Dany can then bolster with former Targaryen loyalists rallying to them to make up for the Horse Lords' military shortcomings. Or the other implied possibility is that the Dothraki were never meant to be an effective invasion force at all, and merely intended to become a countryside nuisance for a certain could-be-real, could-be-fake Targaryen to defeat in order to earn some sweet hero XP points and unite the realm behind him. So, for the sake of this discussion, we'll put our fantasy frames on and take the Dothraki as they are represented in the lore. A highly mobile, mounted army and an almost unbeatable force in open fields. Come on guys, it's a fun topic. Let's not let a petty thing like realism get in the way of it. Also, we're going to work under the restriction that the commander has to muster the forces of their region and meet the horde in some kind of battle. So no holding up in castles, because as our favorite drunken war hero says, it would likely turn the small folk against them, and that will count as a loss in our books. Finally, as previously alluded, we've isolated each kingdom and turned off the alliance game mechanic. Remember, Drogo only has 40,000 warriors. The Tyrells alone are 100,000 strong. The Realms United would be quite capable of ganking the Khal's army with numbers alone. So let's keep it to one-on-one scraps for now. On to the rankings, Tom, my good man. So let's kick things off with the kingdom and commander with the worst chances against the Khalasar, and that is the Crownlands and their only real commander-in-chief, oh god they're screwed, King Dick Hedus Imbredus. Everything about the Crown Lands makes it ripe for the pillaging if Drogo decides to pull up to the Bay of Crabs and touch ground at Crack-Claw Point. And that's before counting the ineptitude of that little incestuous piece of shit. Sure, King's Landing is a highly defensible city, but remember, holding up in castles and letting the small folk get butchered results in a loss under our conditions. With only a 15,000 strong force that functions as little more than a bodyguard army for the king, they just don't have the numbers to meet Drogo's Khalasar in the open field. The terrain of the Crown Lands also highly favors the Dothraki. Much of it is flat fields and mild hills, ideal for the Dothraki's open field high mobility style of warfare, with only the King's Woods presenting the Horse Lords with unfavorable terrain. With a mild climate year-round, fertile lands and prosperous well-stocked towns and villages, it makes food supply barely an issue for the Dothraki once they start raiding. Alongside this, they have the most useless commander in Joffrey, who really needs to shut his fucking mouth and let old man Barristan run the show if they want to stand a chance. Barristan in his younger years might have been able to solo the Horde, but at this point in time he'll probably only be able to kill about 3/4 of them single-handedly, unfortunately. Age gets us all, Selmy. There is no shame in that. 30,000 is still an impressive kill count for one of your age. Without a doubt, the Crown Lands are on the back foot should Drogo make them the priority target. They've got a single ace card, and that's their navy. You know, assuming Stannis left it for them. Sinking Drogo before they touch ground is kind of their only hope in all honesty. But we'll look at more desperate solutions in the more in-depth video. Moving on, and the next most vulnerable kingdom is the Westerlands, with its best commander being the Old Lion. So if Drogo pulls up to Lannisport and begins his rampage, how'll do the Lions fare? The Westerlands are in a much better spot than the Crown Lands due to the fact they have the second largest army in Westeros, totaling 50,000 strong, which is decked out in some of the best equipment in the realm. With a modestly sized navy of around 50 large warships, the Lannisters can also try and sink Drogo's army while it's on the boats, or at the very least inflict some damage. What lets the Westerlands down for us is its geography, climate, and its commander. There's some hills and forests, yeah sure, which might be problematic for the Dothraki, but damn, there is an awful lot of open field, the most in the kingdoms if I remember right, which is ideal for Drogo's Khalasar to fight on. Like the Crown Lands, the villages are also prosperous and well-stocked, giving Drogo an easy time of staying supplied through raids, and combined with the mild climate, it should be pretty easy for the Khal's forces to live off the land. We're also a little worried about this region's best commander. Tywin is pretty good, but not a military genius, and his biggest strength, his calculated ruthlessness of burning and raiding, is more suited to offensive campaigns in other regions rather than his own backyard. And even if he did employ this tactic, he would probably do nothing but mildly amuse the Dothraki, with Drogo saying, "No, it's cute you think that's ruthless, now let me show you how it's done." This isn't a knock on Tywin's skills, by the way, it's more that it's a bad mismatch for his military doctrine and style of warfare. This is one scenario where a horse beats a lion, I'm afraid. Sorry Tywin, like Ned, we really do need to start doing more videos where you get the respect you deserve. Please don't sick Gregor on me. I'd hate for you to have to find a new henchman. On to the next kingdom in the pecking order, and that's the Reach, and unfortunately Mace the Ace is too OP, so we'll have to make do with Randall Tarley for the best commander. Sorry guys, but the Dothraki do need a chance. Off the bat, the Reach have a cracking navy, the largest in the Seven Kingdoms, and certainly have a great shot at sinking Drogo's army before they touch ground. But the Reach is a big place. What if the Red Wine fleet fails to pinpoint where Drogo's fleet will land? Going by just geography, the Reach is perhaps the juiciest and most vulnerable target for Drogo's Khalasar. It's got some of the best weather, it's full of flat open fields, and it's the richest kingdom in terms of a resource that actually matters for an army, that being grain and by extension food. Remember, an army marches on its stomach. It's full of prosperous villages ripe for the sacking and looting, and its gigantic size combined with its openness makes it easy for Drogo's forces to keep highly mobile and pick their battles. To put it simply, it's the region that favors the Khal's forces the most in almost every way. The Reach has a big army, yes, standing at minimum 80,000 strong, but the Reach itself is a big place with a lot of ground to cover, with forces that can't match the Horse Lord's mobility. Catching the Khal with an army that big will be tricky. Remember, the bigger the army, the longer it takes to mobilize and coordinate. Drogo could easily divide and conquer and chip away at the Reach's numbers by preying on the isolated sections of the army and retreating when the main force shows up. Remember, the kingdom's forces can't hold up in their castles. They have to come out and fight to prevent the small folk from turning on them. So, what stopped this kingdom from being placed at the bottom of the pile? This magnificent bald bastard right here. Quite possibly the most perfect commander to face off against the Dothraki in the open field, Randyll Tarly is single-handedly carrying his kingdom away from the bottom spot. And were it not for the fact he has to fight on the most unfavorable terrain against the Dothraki, he could have carried any other region to the top spot in all honesty. See, you don't beat the Dothraki with the boldness of Robb, or the ruthlessness of Tywin, or the army soloing might of the Bobster. You beat them with cold, stoic discipline and following your orders, as demonstrated during the Battle of Cahor when the steadfast Unsullied repelled a Dothraki force nearly 5 times its size. Tarly is an exemplar of a soldier's discipline. He will make sure his forces hold that line no matter the cost and stop the roses being trampled. Our next region, and it's kind of fitting the middle region finds itself in the middle of the list, the Riverlands, and its best commander, the Blackfish. The Riverlands suffers from most of the weaknesses of the previous 3 regions. Flat open terrain ideal for the Horse Lords, fertile lands and lots of ripe for the pillaging villages. But they have plenty of advantages that let them hang a little higher despite sharing those weaknesses. For a start, they have a good-sized army at 45,000 strong, and unlike the previous regions, they are famed to be hardy warriors, which makes a lot of sense. Due to the Riverlands' location and terrain, it's the most experienced region in Westeros when it comes to war, having been the location for many prominent battles. And while they have terrain that favors the Dothraki, they also have terrain they can use against the Horse Lords, mainly their many rivers, which serve as great choke points. I mean, come on, it's in the name. The weather in the Riverlands can also be a little shit depending on the time of year, and make no mistake, bad weather can defeat an army, especially an army like the Dothraki, who don't have much regard for warm clothing and armor, who need solid ground for their horses to charge on, and whose composite bows can be fucked up by something as simple as damp and high humidity. This combined with having the ever-dependable Blackfish in command gives them much better odds than the previous 3 kingdoms in our opinion. Just keep Edmure away from the war table. Next on the list is the Stormlands, and its best commander? Of fucking course it's the Manus! Who the fuck else did you think I would pick? You know the drill by now. Love you, Manus. Drogo and his Khalasar would not have much fun in the Stormlands, that's for sure. And that's not even considering if Stannis decides to keep the royal fleet and sink them before they touch ground, which he is fully capable of doing because he's the fucking Manus. But let's say they make it to shore. They're still in for a rough ride. The Stormlands can only raise 30,000 men, which is 10,000 less than Drogo's Khalasar. But along with being reputed as great warriors, particularly their archers, the Stormmen have a big terrain advantage. While there is some fertile and flat land for the Horse Lords to pillage, the Stormlands is comprised mainly of harsh mountains and thick forests, environments not favorable to mounted forces. And if that's not enough to deal with, the weather is consistently British, i.e. it's fucking raining all the time. And that's not even counting the treacherous autumn storms. This hurts an army's morale, but also makes even the flat terrain of the region soft and treacherous for horses. Just ask the French at Agincourt if you don't believe me. Then to add the vinegar-soaked cherry to what's already looking like a turd pie, you've got the frigging Manus to contend with, who, like Tarly, has the ideal disciplined mindset to counter the Dothraki's chaotic ferocity. Good luck with this one, Drogo. Personally, I think you're fucked.
No bias, promise.
Love you, Manus. Also, just to be clear, even if Bobby B is still alive at this point, he's not the ideal commander for the Stormlands to take on the Dothraki. It's still Stannis. Let's give the middle child his due. Love you, Manus. Next on the list is the Vale, and while Lysa Arryn is Commander-in-Chief, which means Littlefinger is Commander-in-Chief, I think they're not so ridiculously stupid they wouldn't put Bronze Yohn Royce in command. This is basically the inverse of the Reach. Where the Reach is relying solely on its commander to defeat the Khalasar, the Vale can rely solely on their terrain to beat the Horse Lords. I have no doubt whatsoever that Bronze Yohn Royce is probably a good commander, and the Knights of the Vale are known to be some of the finest warriors around. But what's really going to fuck up Drogo here is the terrain, climate, and even the locals. The Vale is nearly all mountains, with many a choke point to trap the Horse Lords in. Not to mention the weather can be so bad at times that it becomes impossible to travel through most of it. Drogo has a big army. Last thing he needs is to be getting bogged down. A big army needs a big supply of food, something that won't come easy in the Vale. Then, to make this even worse, there is already a population of raiders who inhabit the mountains, and somehow I don't think Shagga, son of Dolph, will be too keen on this foreign scum muscling in on his turf. While I don't doubt the Dothraki are better warriors than the Hill tribesmen, you've got to remember the tribesmen have adapted to their environment and know the land. They will wreak havoc on the Dothraki forces before the Knights of the Vale even have to draw a single sword. Yep, mind be best to steer clear of here, Drogo, my friend, and Jon, you can put your feet up. Your homeland has your back on this one. And the second to last region with one of the best chances against the Dothraki forces is the North, with good old Ned Stark as its best commander. Depending on the time of year, this is the worst place for Drogo to land by miles. It's a region that says, "Excuse me, Arselord, but you appear to be breathing. I don't like that." Everything that makes the Stormlands and the Vale a pain in the arse is far worse here. Not to mention it's the biggest kingdom of the lot, and there's really not a lot in it in terms of resources to be grabbed and utilized. It's cold, it's barren, and possesses the most diverse terrain, none of it particularly favorable to Drogo and his Khalasar. In summer, the Dothraki would be broken by the cold and scarcity of resources. In winter, they would be utterly annihilated by it. 40 foot of snow is not to be fucked with. The Northmen are some of the fiercest warriors around, with a sizable force of 45,000 men, and understand how to fight in the cold better than anyone, famously leveraging scorched earth tactics throughout their history to defeat their enemies. A scorched earth approach would be bad enough for an army of Drogo's size in somewhere like the Reach. In the north, it would be nothing short of the coup de grace for the Khalasar. The North wouldn't even need to fight the Dothraki in a pitched battle, just do what they can to deny the Dothraki what little resources there are, and they would all starve and freeze to death in no time. And that's before considering that at the head of the North's army is one of the best military leaders around. While we gave Robert Baratheon the #1 spot for the best military commanders video, it should be noted a fair portion of that glory also belongs to Ned for his strategic brilliance and calmer head. And while the young wolf is definitely not without his merits, his father is less rash and more disciplined, which, as we keep stressing, is the ideal style of command for defeating the Dothraki over bolder, more chaotic tactics which the Dothraki can thrive off. Better drop that Arik, Drogo, my friend, and pick up some knitting needles before you even think about taking on this kingdom with any hope of survival. And finally, our big winner, well, it's Dawn. And what's that, Tom? Oberyn's still alive at this point? Fuck yeah! If dragons couldn't conquer Dawn, what chances do these horse-obsessed bastards have? Unbowed, unbent, unbroken, done. Thanks for watching, guys. Fine, I'll elaborate. Now, you might think Dawn would be one of the lower picks because it's nice and warm and has a climate similar to the Dothraki Sea, which would put Drogo in his element, right? Well, not really. Dawn is sparsely populated, has very little fertile land to make use of, and a good swath of it has more in common with the Red Wastes than the Dothraki Sea. It's an extremely inhospitable region with only a few worthwhile targets, making it a lot easier for the Dornish to predict and catch the Dothraki with their army, which is about 40,000 strong, some of the fiercest warriors around, and led by one of the greatest warriors in Oberyn Martell. And while this isn't confirmed, due to his travels and fighting with his own mercenary company, army across the sea, it's likely he's already had some experience dealing with the Dothraki. I honestly don't know what's worse for Drogo here, dealing with the region's desire to suck every drop of water from your body, or dealing with 40,000 Dornish men led by this charming yet dangerous motherfucker. Word of advice, Drogo, probably not a good idea to take a showboaty wound against Oberyn. Just saying. And that's what's that, Tom? We forgot about the Iron Islands. But who actually gives a fuck about them? Would Drogo even bother? Okay, for completionism. The Iron Islands are not the most screwed region, believe it or not, and no, I'm not kidding. Like the Crown Lands and the Reach, they have the Sucker Punch card, that is the sink them before they land approach. And in all honesty, they probably have the strongest version of that card. They have arguably the best warfighting navy in the realm, and are perhaps the strongest faction when it comes to ship-to-ship warfare. They have the best shot of all factions and regions of just straight up denying the Khal landfall. The problem is their commander. Even with this advantage, we all know Balon will find a way to fuck it up somehow. And that's really our take now. Like we said, if this vid garners enough interest, we'll tackle each region far more in depth and get a bit more tactical and precise. Which region do you think is best suited to repel Drogo and his Khalasar if they set sail for Westeros? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for the idea, Big Mike, and thanks for watching, guys.